Hold on one second.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for your time today. Today, I've had the extreme pleasure to introduce one of newer author to me. As you can see, being from Northeast Ohio and being Italian American, we do not know anything much out of our own comfort zone here. Olive Garden, Pizza Hut, that's really all that we know. I've had the tremendous pleasure of getting to know many outstanding authors and writers through a connection, Mary Kovach. You got to listen to her in an earlier podcast episode, and she has now introduced me to the outstanding author, writer, and jack of all trades, everything from what I've seen, Andrew Cotto. Andrew Cotto is a writer for Condé Nast, New York Times, and he has many authors of novels that he's been out. The Domino Effect in 2011, The Outer Boroughs Blues, a Brooklyn Mystery, 2012, Cucina Tipica, 2018, Black Irish Blues, 2020, and most recently, Cucina Romana. So thank you, Andrew, for your time today. And so introduce yourself to my Northeast Ohio Italian American listeners.
Sure. Thank you for having me so much, Emma. I really appreciate it. Hello, Northeast Ohio. There's tons of Italians in Ohio, though. You don't have good
tons.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting to the point that we don't know that we're Italian American anymore.
You're marrying too many Germans and Irish. The introduction was terrific. I'm an author and a journalist, mostly novels on the author side, and journalism, mostly lots about food. I write for the New York Times, La Cucina Italiana, Rachel Ray's magazines, Italy magazine. So the food focus of my writing, both my fiction and my nonfiction, is very much rooted in Italian food, and both via characters who are Italian American or Italian Americans in Italy. It just seems to be the thrust of my work, and I can't get away from it, and I don't want to get away from it.
Growing up, Andrew, my father has a stack of National Geographics on his nightstand, and I feel the connection to George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, where he pulls out the magazine and he says, I could go anywhere. I could enjoy the coconuts in this place, the jungles in that place. And the ironic thing is that we've had a 6 degrees of separation. I have probably read your articles in Condé Nast, probably have read many of your food articles, etc., in Italy magazine. And, as young Americans here in the United States, we dream of going to those exotic places, or we dream of listening to the stories of our grandparents told through dinners around the table, etc., and to see somebody that has intertwined food into their novels is something that is extremely interesting and wonderful to me. So on that topic, food seems to be the center of Italian life and the Italian family. And it is much the center of your own writing as well. What flavor inspires you?
I mean, the flavor in particular inspires me. I mean, I don't know. I'm such a broad palate kind of person. I like almost everything from the Italian peninsula that you have, and what's reinvented here as Italian American cuisine. I don't have a favorite. My favorite is always the next meal. The next flavor I have is the one that's going to be my favorite. And I often joke that like my life is nothing more than like killing time between meals. So I'm just anticipating that meal, and like I sort of take the the Italian perspective on it, where I'm hoping and appreciating what's put in front of me, and hoping that it's procured locally and produced lovingly, and fresh, and all that kind of stuff that we just take for granted. That's sort of the inherent heart of Italian food. So I like it all. I'm not so I don't have a particular preference for any particular region or for any particular dish or any particular flavor. I just like the fact that it's Italian.
Much the experience that we've had growing up, you and I probably had the same as well. Our grandmothers would sit us down at the table, eat. Have you ever gotten to a situation where you just had something that has inspired you so much that you had to go write about that meal?
Again, that's like everything.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean that happens a lot. I wrote an article for La Cucina Italiana magazine saying that Italian food is my muse. Right? Some people are inspired by beautiful women or beautiful men or locations and settings and whatnot. I'm inspired by food, and that's why I just started. I didn't intentionally set out to do this in my novels. I just started like feeding my characters. I like feeding people, right? And often what I feed them are meals that I've had personally. Right? The most biographical aspect of all my novels is what's on the plate. Because I'm not making any of that up. Right? All that stuff comes from my own personal experiences, and it has to because that's how I'm able to write about it with such authority. But if I had to pick one, sort of inspiration, the ultimate, the ultimo inspiration of my Italian, palate and my love for the food is the guy in Tuscany named Dario Cecchini. You ever heard of him?
No, but go ahead and
If you
elaborate.
Google his name, he's season 6, episode 2 of A Chef's Table on Netflix. It's all about Dario, right? And this is 25 years after I'm in. I lived in Tuscany for a year when I first began my career change into writing, and I lived close to Dario's shop in the middle of Chianti, Panzano and Chianti is the town. And I knew who he was. I read about it in Food and Wine magazine. And they were saying this guy's just a showman and a huge-hearted man, and someone you have to go visit. And so I visited him as soon as I got there, and I was probably in his shop once a week. And what he has in his, at the time it was just a butcher shop. Now he has 2 restaurants, and it's become this whole franchise. But what you experience in his shop is someone who embodies the love of food from they don't say farm to table there, right? But like, from the raising of the animals, and he's a butcher, so that's there's a lot of meat involved here. To actually serving it to people, and you walk into his butcher shop, right? And he's got food out all day long, and wine, and it's all free. So there's a party. It's like a party all day in his butcher shop. He's behind the counter, right? Talk, ciao, hello, hey, posing for pictures. If you went on my Instagram account, you see me and Dario like this on a couple different occasions. There's probably 10,000 pictures of Dario and somebody else like one like this because he just spent his life. You can see his heart coming out of his face. He's just such a big, beautiful man, and he makes incredible bisteccas. He's an aficionado of the Divine Comedy, so he could be back there, butchering while reciting cantos from the Inferno. And he's everyone's paying attention. It's like it's bravo Dario, and he's like so gracious. And you spend hours, you can linger in his shop for hours. He's since opened up a restaurant called the Ufficina di Bistecca, the Office of Steak. And it's like one of those, you just keep eating steak, not like gross Brazilian barbecue way where they're stuffing you, right? They're just making bistecca fiorentinas, right? And just serving them up, and he makes beautiful sides, ucciolato and brodo, white beans with tomatoes, a little bit of broth. He has beautiful lardo. He has what he calls sushi di Chianti, which is, tartar, his version of tartar. And it's just great, but like the food is wonderful and it's spectacular, but it's the person behind the food, right? But I think that's why so many of us Italian Americans are attracted to food, not only because it's so good, because the people who serve it to us love us, right? Our grandmothers, right? Our mothers, right? Our fathers who cook, etc. There's such joy in making the food for the people that they love that it changes the experience. It's like that's the flavor that I like the best. I can go back to your previous question. Right?
You make an excellent point. Food is memory. And through memories, we can relive the lives of those who've cooked for us. Our grandparents come back to life when we cook those recipes, when we hold on to those traditions. And one thing that I absolutely love, and I can almost picture Dario in his store, is that cooking for people is like the Divine Comedy. You are playing your life out, the passion, the emotion, everything out in front of you. And this is what you are, and you're putting it into your food. And I will make sure I make a note of that, because he sounds like somebody that I would love to, get to know, etc. Because anyone who has passion, anybody can cook, but a true cook can make something out of nothing as long as you have love, passion, and everything that goes into it, and you understand that, like you said, almost the farm to table movement.
Yeah, it's just that part. It's that component of it that they can't be manufactured.
Yeah.
And when it's there, it changes everything. I still make my grandmother's dishes. I still make my mother's dishes, and they're my favorite things to make. And it's to the point we can talk about this all day.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Now, I am married to a Greek American. He's first generation, and it's interesting enough. Una fats, una rats. I love that all the Greeks like to tell me that. I'm like, okay. The Greeks created civilization, but the Italians perfected it. However, he is a great lover of cooking himself, and he has a question for you. You mentioned Dario, and he wanted to ask, which chef in the culinary world creates dishes that speak closest to your soul? If it is still Dario, you can continue, you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dario obviously would be the answer to that question, but since we already covered him, and his ears are burning somewhere in the middle of Tuscany right now, I can pivot somewhere else. I find sort of the figures, and this is gonna be one that you're gonna be surprised by, but one of my favorite celebrity chefs is actually not Italian at all. It's Ina Garten. She's not.
Oh, yeah.
I love her, and the reason I love her is that she's always so happy when she's cooking, right? And she's cooking for her husband, and she loves her husband. And he comes home from work, and he's like, "Oh, this thing, I'm so happy you cooked for me." Right? And they're not making Italian food, but she makes food like an Italian, right? And it's not complicated, right? Her cookbooks are great. They're really accessible. They're beautiful pictures. She just strikes me as someone who is made, joyous through her love of food and love her sharing food, right? She adores doing it, and she's one of my favorite figures.
The sharing food and the sharing aspect. Lydia Bastianich, her little phrase, tutti a tavola a mangiare, everybody to the table to eat. And that whole philosophy that we share the food around the table for everyone to do, the whole philosophy that brings joy, as you mentioned, when people put that into their cooking. And side note, that's my husband's favorite chef too, which is funny. Yeah.
Lydia or Ina?
Ina. But
Okay.
yeah, Lydia's amazing too. I can't say enough about her as well. But Ina, on top of it, he loves cooking and watching her cook, etc.
Oh, how funny!
Yeah.
She had such a big fan club. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
I hope her ears are burning right now too.
Oh, I hope so too, So growing up, I am the daughter of an Irish American artist and an Italian American financier mother. I didn't really realize that I was Italian American until, I will be honest, I was trying to think of this question until I went to Rome for the first time, truly understood what it means. How old were you when you first realized that you were Italian American?
Oh, I think I knew it, like, in the womb. My mother was drinking wine and she was pregnant. And when I was a kid, I grew up around here, right? In the Northeast, in the New York area in particular, there's just tons of Italian Americans, right? I mean, there are of course Italian Americans all over America, but I would argue that this is the epicenter of Italian Americanism, or Italian Americana, I should say. So when I was a kid, we lived in sort of a neighborhood that, your ethnicity was part of your identity. So there was Irish kids, there was Jewish kids, there was Italian kids, right? And all our parents were both. We were all 100%, right? Mostly kids whose parents moved out of the city into the little towns just over the George Washington Bridge, just north of the city, right? So like your identity was identified because your parents were so distinct from each other. The Irish parents hung out together. The Italian parents, they did that tribalism thing, not to a pathological point, right, where they were adversaries, right? But like, we knew, right? The O'Shea kid came to my house for dinner, right?
Mhm.
Because we were having better food, right? And the joke was, you Irish don't know anything about food, right? So it was inherent upon my identity from a very young age, and it was also, buttressed by the fact that every Sunday we went to my grandmother's house. Right? That was not an option. You went there on Sunday, and you spent all day there. And my grandfather spoke Italian, he didn't speak English, and my grandmother spoke English and Italian. And and we were playing Sinatra on the radio, right? If they were watching something on TV, it had somebody from Italian. It was something Italian based, right? If we were watching a ball game, we rooted for the Italian guy, right? I mean, but there wasn't that many then. So it was clear upon us. We didn't have the shirts, kiss me, I'm Italian. we did this Feast of Seven Fishes. We did, Lamb on Easter. We did all the holidays. We did every Sunday, which wasn't a holiday. I would argue. And so it was clear upon me the things that made our culture different than, my Irish friends or my Jewish friends or my friends in the Caribbean, right? So, it was clear, and I was proud of it.
I find people's experiences of growing up Italian American interesting in the fact that um, in some circumstances, when my parents met when they were at university, my paternal grandparents found my mother to be exotic and not of the right thing for my father, and that, a lot of racism came into it as well. Um, with you growing up in New York, did you ever experience any sort of racism against Italian Americans, or any sort of thought of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this because it's not American enough?
No, I mean, we were also like assimilated back then, and
Yeah.
in the '70s, in the '70s and '80s, and I mean, there was the cultural differences and the stereotypes, I experienced more of like that sort of, and surprisingly so, that Italian American, reductive imagery when I got older, and I went to private school, a boarding school for my last year of high school. And all the kids there would say, not all kids, but many of the kids there would say, like, "Oh, Cotto, you're Italian, and you're in this expensive school. Your dad must be a mobster." Right?
Mm,
My dad's a musician, right? What are we talking about? And
yeah.
like I went to college. Oh, Cotto, I'm from the Northeast, and I'm Italian. Oh. I mean, I was stunned that it was so prevalent amongst, sort of the upper class, right? The kids that I grew up with in the middle class, I mean, they was like something stupid.
That's interesting. A different topic, different day, but you're not the only one that has stated that. And I've heard that throughout with many of my interviews. So different topic, different day. I may come back to you on that. I
I'm
find it
here for you.
interesting. Yes. So what inspires you to carry on the traditions of being Italian American?
To me, it embodies the things that mean the most to me, which is really, not to be too simplistic, but just being with other people and doing something that we love, and that involves love. That's my church. I mean, it's my reason for being. I was joking about, like, oh, my life is nothing but killing time between meals, but I'm not totally joking. I mean,
Mhm.
that's my favorite part of Italian Americana is being Italian American. Sorry, it is that tradition of food and table and family, etc. It all being sort of, intersected as one to one thing. Um, and I enjoy food by myself too, but it's always better. It's always better when you're with people that you are getting to know or that you care about deeply. Holidays, eating. When Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve and Easter are my favorite holidays because the food is front and center. Right? No presents, there's other things getting in the way. And that is something I believe that I feel so passionate about because I'm Italian American and how I was raised. Right? Food just means so much to people of our descent, of our background. And both in Italy and here in America. I find the cuisines distinct and the cultures distinct too, but they share certainly, a passion for something, and it's something that I am passionate about. And I have a hard time thinking of something else that I would enjoy doing more. I mean, I don't know, horseback riding or something. I don't know what it's going to be. People have their hobbies and their interests, right? And mine's eating and drinking with my friends and family.
I think one of the most important things around food is that when you look at immigration and how Italian Americans came here to the United States in the early migrations, much of them did not know what meat was because they could not afford it. And they became the great meat eaters when they would write back to their family here. And the evolution of and the richness of Italian food and that came along with the migration. Wouldn't you much agree with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I find it so interesting that so many people in America associate Sicily with like meatballs, and
Yeah.
sausages, or Calabria with meatballs and stuff. They're like, no, they ate fish, right? They didn't have meat, right? Vegetables and fish was their diet, and still to this day, you go to Sicily, you'll be eating fish, right? And vegetables, which is great, So yeah, I mean, I think that the Italian American table, right? It was born from the same appreciations, of food and reverence for food that they experienced when they were in Italy, but adapted to what the surroundings provided them here in America. Meat being one of those things that they could have eventually, right? When they got around to being able to afford it, then they flaunted it, right? The big thing my grandfather was always fond of doing, was not obviously wasting anything. He would be at the table, literally at the table, eating for hours. Right? He was a brick mason. And he worked hard 6 days a week. On Sunday, he basically sat around the table and ate as his family, circled around him. He was like the sun, and we all circled around him, and he didn't move. And my grandmother's brought him everything, and he would be tearing. We'd all be done, right? He'd be tearing apart the chicken carcass, and finding every last morsel he could find in it, right? Sucking the bones, between the ribs, etc., the neck, right? And then he'd take the thigh bone, carve out the marrow, and eat the marrow, and smoke his cigarettes through the chicken thigh bone, like a filter, right? Just because
Oh my goodness.
he wasn't letting anything go to waste, right? And the meat was like, I earned meat, right? I made enough money this week to feed my family, all 12, 14 of us, right? Meat and pasta and everything, and he wasn't going to waste anything. Right.
My husband calls me out on that a lot, because I grew up much that same way. Do not waste anything. You want to make sure that you pull off every last thing. You boiled a chicken carcass to make chicken broth. I remember growing up and watching my mom suck the cartilage off the end of the chicken bones. Like, why are you doing that? And sucking the marrow out. And I'm like, that's disgusting. But that's part of that whole thing. I earned this. I worked hard for this. So therefore, I'm going to do this.
Absolutely. But that's like all, as I mean, the memories of those days are obviously really prevalent in me. I talk about it all the time at length. But that particular anecdote of him carving out the marrow and smoking his cigarettes to the bone is like, to me, it's like the perfect symbol of our Sundays. It's hysterical, right? But B, it represents his ethos. Nothing's going to be wasted. And then he was like, I guess he was like showing off, right? He was like proud, like he's back, he's finally done eating, right? And now he's going to smoke a cigarette through the phone. I love it.
I have to flash back before I ask the next question to an experience that I had abroad. I was walking around in the streets of Rome the first time I studied abroad, and one of my classmates, very American, probably been in the country since it started, very little ethnicity, and she's like, I want to go to KFC. And I'm like, well, why don't you want to go over here to this Italian restaurant? We're in Italy. You want to eat what you have here. She's like, well, I want to eat what I'm used to eating. I know KFC, so therefore I want to do it. I'm like, well, you're in Italy where the best food that is out there exists. And I think this is a situation that exists much in Northeast Ohio. We're kind of deluded with a primo corso from Olive Garden and a side of Papa John's. And again, I just created that, but I think we're deluded and we don't quite understand what the true Italian food is, or what the true Italian culture is. And this has created much of a different Italian American culture from the 5 famous boroughs in New York City, and much of you've written about as well. So what makes, in your opinion, an Italian American associate what it means to be Italian American with New York?
We have such a history here, and the numbers, right, just don't allow it to be diluted. There is Italians in all 5 boroughs, right, throughout the tri-state area: Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Down to Philly, up to Boston. They're all live there. There's little Italies in all those cities, right? New Haven, Connecticut has tons of Italians. Watertown, Connecticut has tons of Italians. It's just like the presence here is so strong, right? And so historic, right? I mean, Italians helped build New York, right? With my novel Attleboro Blues, the character's grandfather came to build the Brooklyn Bridge, right? His grandmother came to kill him, man, but that's a different story. So there's this history here that perseveres because there's still so much interest in it. I mean, I think they dug their roots so deeply into these places that it's hard to unearth them. There's a Little Italy in the Bronx, there's a Little Italy in Queens, there's a Little Italy in Manhattan, obviously the more famous one. So there's Italians all over Staten Island, and of course Manhattan, has Little Italy, where I lived for many years as a young man. And I think the presence here is so much part. And we have Columbus Circle. We have all these markers of our existence, and people come here, right? I think this is probably the key as well. As much as like there's a desire to sustain our own identity, other people help us sustain it because they come here to eat our food. Right? They come here to experience Italian American culture. They go on stupid Sopranos tours in New Jersey, right? It's like all this interest in Italian Americana. I think it's really focused heavily on New York City, right? So it sustains itself through the interests of the Italian American community, right? And also through people who come to experience it.
The last time I was in New York City, I tried to go to all of the Little Italies. I couldn't find Arthur Avenue. I got to, so this is Northeast Ohio, and I got lost on the subway. So next time I go, I need to find Arthur Avenue because I want to go shopping in some of the traditional stores. We only have one Italian groceria here in Canton where I live, and it's been family owned for almost 100 years, and they have everything traditional, but I want to go to see what some of the products that I associate with being Italian American too, and any of the traditional products that I can't find here as well. The farther west you get from New York, the harder it is, I feel, to get those traditional products. The importers aren't as pure as what they are in New York City.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I imagine also that it's harder for them to stock these things. People are going to buy them, right?
Oh, definitely, because they're not familiar with it too. Because also, when you get to the Italian American culture here in Northeast Ohio, many of the Italians come from the Calabria region, Sant'Andrea, or they come from a little town called Fossalto, which is in the Molise region. That's specific here to Canton. Or when you get up to the Cleveland area in Parma, you have, it's a wide range or a different group of Italians here. So they're going to have their own specific products that they prefer or that they like to buy as well. So yeah, I much agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I know. Show you something. I was so excited when I got this that I broke the cap taking it off. But you're not going to find this in Ohio. This is like anchovy oil. Like the Korean food and Chinese food has fish oil, right?
Yeah,
this is basically that's using nothing but anchovy, right? And it's an Italian product I got on Arthur Avenue in Little Italy in the Bronx. And you make a pasta with it. You use Calabrian peppers and anchovies in, and you drizzle this anchovy sauce on top, and it just blows it up. It's like, you're just not going to find it, right? There's a recipe for it in Cucina Italiana magazine too.
Definitely. Then I will make sure I find that recipe and I'll attach it to this podcast to look that up there. I think people get turned off by anchovies because put on pizza. I'm like, no, anchovies have one of the most unique flavors, and they're one of the richest products you can add. All you have to do is add a little bit, and it adds so much depth to a meal. And my husband, speak of that, was laughing at me because that's something that I grew up with. And then tuna, in the can, or sardines, like sardines in it. And it's like, you don't understand, like those are my pure memories of having my grandmother sit us down, and that was our antipasta on saltine crackers, teaching us, Yes. And he's like, you just don't understand. I'm like, well, it's like, this is where it comes down to food is memory and food is love.
Yeah, and food's also really, really good. These things like, that non-Italians are afraid of, like anchovies and sardines, etc. They've been ruined because they had it on pizza, right? I mean, I don't put anchovies on pizza either. But anchovies and this little bit of pasta, or I wrote an article, you can attach this link as well, for Men's Journal about cooking with anchovies, and things you can do with them, and a lot of times people won't even know that they're in there. I mean, obviously you want to make sure they don't have a fish allergy, but like I use them in cooking my meat, when I'm making a lamb or something, right? I'll also mince a bunch of anchovy into the oil mixture, into the lipid, right? And it adds this depth
Yeah,
of
yeah.
flavor to it. Or just use it simply as an ingredient in your pasta. It's spectacular. The flavor is so, you know, deep and round.
Something that I think too many people, just much like that classmate that I had, that wanted to go to KFC. I think too many people are afraid to try something because it's just not what they're used to, or that it's not part of their culture, or even cartoons have made them afraid to try anchovies because yuck, they're on pizza.
Right.
Who has them on pizza? That all you have to do is take that one moment and just give it a try, and your mind will be blown on what the results could possibly be.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that quite a bit too. I lived in Tuscany for years. I mentioned. I also taught in Rome for a summer at John Cabot University, not too long ago, I think 2015. And I had the students there were, it's an American school, John Cabot University is over in Trastevere.
Mhm.
And half the students were regular John Cabot, full timers, and the other half of my class were Americans abroad for the summer, big summer class. And the ones who were abroad from Florida and Iowa, I think Wisconsin, right? And I really had to force them to sort of break out of their comfort zone, because I think a lot of it's also when you're feeling displaced, you want a food that you know, right? So
Yeah,
like if someone's
yeah,
new to a place, right, and they're feeling like like they're it's surreal almost sometimes when people travel, especially if it's their first time overseas, whatever. They don't know the culture, everything spins them, the different languages, the different sounds of sirens, the way the lights work, the little itty bitty showers if you're in France, right? And I think that it speaks to the importance of food where they're seeking comfort in familiar. So that's not when they're going to branch out. I always say, okay, I work it slowly with my guests, unless they're like really, gung ho about, diving right into the
yeah,
indigenous
yeah.
cuisine, right? But I get why someone might want KFC when they're in Italy. It breaks my heart, right? And then they deserve a smack, but I'm still saying, like, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You did
Um,
smack it, right?
yeah, you and I could talk for hours on food and experience, etc. If you ever want a good restaurant to go to in Castel Gandolfo, I'll have to throw it at you because I still remember that makes a great ravioli alla fiori di zucca, and I've never had something where I could lick a plate clean, not be ashamed of it.
Never be ashamed of licking your plate. Yeah, I actually think I'm going to go back I'm either going back this summer or in October, depending on what happens. A couple of things I have up in the air,
Yeah.
but I'll be back. I'll be back very soon.
Hopefully soon I will be able to get back too. I'm hoping for everything to, open up at least. But here's to hoping that we're making a turn in the pandemic, positive sense in that manner. Now, wanted to bring around and focus mainly on your novels. And you have many different novels here, and you've written many different articles. But one question I wanted to ask is how much of you comes through your main characters in your novels?
It's hard to answer that question honestly because I don't really. I'm sure I'm fooling myself to a certain extent, But you have to write from somewhere, right? I mean, there's a reason that all my main characters are Italian American men, right? And somewhere along the spectrum of my age
Mhm.
experiences, right? They range from a teenager to someone in I guess his 30s, right? And I have 6 novels, and 4 different main characters, and they all like food. They all, have Italian American backgrounds. They all, are in the Northeast, New York, Boston, places I'm familiar with, or in Italy. The
Mhm.
Teen books take place in Italy, right? So like there's a part of my soul and my identity that goes into these characters. Though how much of them actually inform the character themselves, it varies. I think my first book, probably the one about the kid from Queens who goes to boarding school, that one feels a lot like me as an adolescent, and then
Mhm.
less so in the other ones. I have a new book coming out in January. That's practically a memoir. I mean, it was intended to be a memoir about me and my oldest friend. I was joking about my friend O'Shea, the Irish kid. I mean,
Mhm.
he was my oldest, dearest friend. He passed away from leukemia 8 years ago, and it really broke my heart. And I was trying to write about it for years and years and years, and I couldn't because I was trying to write about us as real people. Instead, I fictionalized it enough where I could get it down the page. It was still incredibly difficult to do, but the character's name is Andy Cotto. The other character's name is Mike O'Shea, though it is billed as a fiction. So that one, it's like writ large. But prior to that, it just varies. I think I as an author don't have the talents, I believe, to sort of like write from a completely different perspective. Even different gender. I would think I have female characters, of course, and I think I create them well. I don't think I can take one of those characters and maneuver them through a whole novel. I'd like to get to that point, but then again, I don't know if I feel the need to do that because there's plenty of women who write women better than I would. Right? I think I need to write where my area of expertise is, and that's with guys who've had similar experiences in life that I have, and I fictionalize them to make them broader than just my own experiences. Right? I don't think my own experiences are interesting enough, with the exception of this upcoming book, to warrant a micro focus on myself. I ain't that interesting.
Oh, come on. You're interesting enough for me to introduce you to people who have not read anything. So you're one step there in that direction.
Well, thank you.
So two of your most important books are Cucina Tipica and Cucina Romagna. I don't want to give too much away because I did read and watch your interview with Mary Kovacs and the Sons and Daughters of Italy that you recently had done. So I have too been wrapped up in family stories and photos of the old country, and I have made my way back to my grandmother's village. I have not been back to my grandfather's, but I've studied and I've lived abroad. Is it Jacoby or Jacob? I want to make sure I pronounce it right.
It's Jacoby.
Jacoby. Okay. Jacoby Pines lives out almost every Italian American's dream of getting stuck in the old country.
Mm-hmm.
What inspired you to create this character? And I'm only assuming it reflects much of your time in Florence when you were there.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, Jacoby and I had very little in common, as on paper. Right? But what I did with him was take one of my most profound experiences and drop him sort of into it. And I went to Italy for the first time as an adult. I was in my late 20s. My first time was in Venice, Florence, and Rome. And the time we got to Florence, I'd already decided I was going to move there. That I had to spend a significant time in my life, not permanently. And I love New York and America, but a significant amount of time being on a vacation, period in Italy. And 3 or 4 years later, I was transitioning from my first career into that of being a teacher and a writer, and I thought that was the perfect opportunity to do that. So I quit my job, moved over there, wrote my first book, was immersed in everyday life in Italy for 12 months, right, all seasons, etc. And I lived in this barn in the hills south of Florence, behind a villa. It was a renovated barn. It was like sleeping on hay. Right? It was once a barn, converted into like this nice apartment. The duplex, with a beautiful loft upstairs, and the people in the villa were this lovely retired couple. And that's exactly where, and it's above this little village called Antella, in the hills south of Florence. And that's exactly where Jacoby lives, in that very barn, right? He has the same sort of experience I had when he got there. It was like, he goes on holiday. He's like, I'm not leaving. He's not going home for a few years and finding his way back. He's like, I'm not going home, rip up my plane ticket type thing, right? And that's sort of the adventure part of the story, is him trying to find means to make that a reality. But he's pursuing something that was a little bit more dramatic than what I did, right? Which makes it more compelling, obviously. But he's doing it in the auspices of which I live. He goes to the butcher shop in Penzano. He's friends with the butcher in the village and the vegetable guy who are my people. He makes a friend of an expat who's a guy I know in Italy, and I didn't change his name. The expat friend of Jacoby's, a guy named Bill Guyon, is my dear friend Bill from Rome. I took him up to Florence, fictionalized his experience, but so he's very much walking in my shoes. So we were a different size. What was that?
First time I stepped into Florence, the city, I went on a quiet little walk in the afternoon, a passeggiato, if you want to put it that way. And I came on, like when you come into where the Duomo's at, the streets get very narrow, and then all of a sudden it explodes right there with the Duomo. I can only imagine your character and your own experience of being wowed by all of this. How do your characters or even Americans get beyond the wowness and actually have a sense of place in Italy, especially too since you lived there for a year?
It's hard because it can be, I mean, this checks your boxes, right? Architectural beauty, history, right? Cuisine, right? Natural beauty, right? I mean, there's so many things that are of appeal on the ground in Italy. Whether you're in Venice and having your head spun by this floating city with canals and bridges, gondolas, and like, oh my, the light is so surreal, right? Or Rome, like, oh my gosh, the Colosseum. Right? I mean, you're walking past ruins, right? From the dawn of civilization, or modern civilization. Right? I mean, it's just so mind-boggling if those are things that excite you. I mean, there's people who get excited about the Grand Canyon, right? And I can give a rat's tuchus about the Grand Canyon. I don't want to go there. I don't go to Disneyland, right? I don't want to climb Mount Everest. I mean, I don't want to ride a motorcycle through the desert. Right? I want to be in a place like Italy because it works for me on a visceral level and then on a spiritual level. And it's hard for people who had the same sort of reaction not to be overwhelmed by the wonder. So what I recommend people do is just to not try to gobble it all up. We're Americans, and I think one of the things that defines us as a people, and not in the most complimentary way, is that we're very consumerish. We're consumers.
Definitely,
Right?
definitely.
And I think we react to things like buy, 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 right? And there's references in the book. Bill, who's an expat, 35 years, is telling Jacoby, like, I like the way you approach Italy. You seem to have the pacing of this place almost like, innately, right? As opposed to the Americans that he's encountered during his time there, who just want to do more, 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 more. They want to eat all this food. They want to buy all the leather, and they want to, to see everything they can possibly see in as fast.
Get the checklist out and check
Right.
it off. Yeah.
Snapping, basically before, something. It was always pictures, 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 people leaning against the tower in Pisa, so, it's hard to criticize people because I get it. It's like falling in love. You start to fall in love with someone, and your logic goes out the window, right? I want to see her or him every second of every day. What's she doing now? What's she doing now? It's like all that overwhelming aspect of that. All the chemicals that are happening when you fall in love. Are sort of like happens, I think, for people who see a place, right? Because the place isn't, another thing, a girl or a boy or whomever. It's so overwhelming, right? You just can't hold his hand and hug it. Right? It's unapproachable to a certain extent. So you have to sort of kind of temper yourself if possible. And that's where I love the idea of being an ambassador to Italy. My favorite thing about being there and going back all these times with guests, etc., right, is that I can help them immerse in Italy in a way that makes their experience more valuable. Right?
Mhm.
Charging. Hold on a second, I have to plug my thing in.
Sure.
I really like. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do intend on going back there at some point to live, maybe for the rest of my life. I don't know, maybe half a year if I'm lucky enough to do it. And one of the things I'd like to do while there is help why I write about Italy so much, right? I like to sort of demystify it and sort of provide like sort of a local knowledge or a guide to spending your time in Italy, in a way that fosters as much enjoyment as possible. Right? I think people get there and hit the ground running, and then all of a sudden it's over, right? And they might have a suitcase full of things they bought, and their camera's memory is clogged because they have so many photos taken. But I don't think that's not the experience, right? The experience is much different pacing than that. So I think that's one of the problems.
My grandmother used to call that bag of things, it's in dialect, it's called cheddar mills. And
Oh,
she's like,
really?
"Oh, yeah, I don't know the derivative or anything like that, but I found myself in that same experience where I almost thought that the blinds were going to be pulled up and then I'm back to Northeast Ohio, and that all of this is a dream. And that, when you come out of the Coliseum subway stop, and right there, as you're coming up the steps in Rome, there's the Colosseum. You're like, no, it's all fake. It's all fake. Like,
Right.
and you see so many people walking by, and you're like, how can they not stop and fall in love with this every single day? And I think I can imagine what many people experience, and I might too, or I myself have experienced much the same as well. And it's hard to not get caught up and checking something off your list or taking that photo.
In Cucina Romana, it's Jacoby's first time in Rome. They live, obviously where I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, south of Tuscany, south of Florence in the hills. But him and Bill go down to Rome for some business. And Bill really tells Jacoby, right? Here's what and Bill had lived in Rome for 30 years, right? Here's what you do. Here's your itinerary. And he's like, that's it. It's like, that's it. That's all you do for today, right? Is walking to this place, to this place, to this place. You're having lunch here, then you're going there, and you're going the exact same route back because you're going to miss so much of what you should see in the first pass through. And Jacoby's so underwhelmed by the agenda, but he doesn't. He trusts Bill. They're like they're soulmates, right? As pals, right? And he does it, and it just makes perfect sense, right? This is what he had me do. And there's a nice slow tour of Rome, through the eyes of the first-time visitor, and throughout the book. And I'm getting quite a few compliments on that, which I really appreciate. Even a very surprising visit to the Colosseum, which I won't blow it, I won't spoil, right? But Jacoby experiences the Colosseum in the middle of the night in a way that most people don't, unless you're a cat.
So where can my readers find your books?
They're everywhere. I mean, obviously, it's so funny. I have a book show too that I hosted on the In the Limelight Network with Carissa Burt, who's Mary introduced me to, right? And it's funny, whenever I ask that question, my author friends would say, well, there's the big one, no one names my name, but I don't know why you can't say Amazon.
Well, yeah, everything's pretty much readily
I mean, you want to sell
on
books,
Amazon.
you gotta be on board with Amazon. So my books are available at Amazon. They're available through the publisher. The respective, if you want to buy from the independent publishers, just look them up and you'll see where they are. My website has information, has all the links to all the books. Your local bookstore, they're all nationally distributed through traditional publishers. So your local bookstore probably doesn't have it on the shelf. But if you went to the book seller and said, I want this book by Andrew Cotto, they just put it in the system, it'll pop up, they'll have it in a couple of days, right? I know people want to support their local bookstores, and I encourage that, very, very much.
Oh, definitely. Too many local bookstores have gone out of business due to the pandemic. So all the more important to support them.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel, there's a great independent bookstore if you're looking for one that is of the Italian American variety in Boston called I Am Books. So an I for Italian, Am for American Books. They went physically out of operations during the pandemic, but they still operate online. Right? I do readings of there all the time. They were in the north end of Boston, the Little Italy of Boston, and they're really good guys. The owner, Nicola, is Italian. But he has his bookstore here in Boston, and they're a great place to order from. They're doing tons of online, effective, quick, cheap shipping. They have all my books. They're super sweet people. And if people want signed copies of my books, they can write to me through my website. There's a contact button there, and I'll be happy to sign them or inscribe them if they so wish. And they can also arrange on my website to do book clubs. There's affiliated with an organization that runs book clubs nationwide, and there's a link on my page to the book club, and I'm always thrilled. I love engaging with crowds. I miss events very much. So I now we can do Zoom things. I'm happy to. I'm also happy to show up in person if there's enough people and you're anywhere within driving distance of New York. I would include Ohio in that list.
Come on over sometime. We can show you that we're a horse of a different color over here.
Yeah, I'm becoming more and more fascinated with Ohio. I don't gotta say, I'd make the road trip out there to hang out with you guys.
I always have to say, it's like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, home of the Football Hall of Fame. Football was created in Canton, Ohio. So come on over sometime. The Italians here, I know I'm giving some slag in this interview, but sometimes we can have a great experience, and we're very passionate people whenever you get stuck into the group. You can't just look on the surface, just as in every other experience and every other thing that you've talked about. You can't just surface through life. You have to go deeper to see what is the soulful meaning of different things, different people and different groups. So you put it to the point there. One last thing a couple last things. So on the front of one of your books is a cinghiale, which is the wild boar. And did you ever have any strange experiences with wild boar?
Cucina Tipica, the first book in the Italian Adventure series, there's a Cinghiali on the cover because the Cinghiali plays an important role in the book. The one on the cover is kind of cute, right? The one in the book is not cute, right? He's roaming the property where Jacoby lives, eating up the truffles that he finds, unearths from under the trees. And there's an encounter with that wild boar, which I won't reveal the outcome, but it does end in a really good meal. And so Cinghiali ragu is like my favorite, among my favorite
Definitely,
Italian.
definitely.
It's just so good. Right? And it's really hard to make well. I mean, you really have to brine it for a long time. And Bill is a chef, so he Jacoby delivers him this Cinghiali, and Bill makes a feast out of it for the whole village. It's a great scene. It's like right out of like Chocolat or Big Night, one of those really great film movies about food. It's a really and they put black truffles on it and drink Brunello de Montalcino with it. I mean, it's just, I could read that scene over and over again. So that's why the Cinghiali's in the book.
And then
I have not encountered one, right? I mean, I've
oh,
seen
you have
foraging
not.
around,
Okay,
right?
interesting.
I've heard them at night, foraging around, like what's that noise? Like I've heard the beasts out beyond.
Oh, definitely,
But
definitely.
I've never come face to face with one.
I've had a couple friends who, in the Molise region where my grandmother is from, they have the Cinghiale down there, and they've actually gotten so bad that they have to go out in herds and start killing them because otherwise they're getting in and they're getting their crops, etc. And the farther you go down in Italy, the more that they depend upon the land, and you can't have these wild animals ruining your crops.
No, I mean it's a problem around the world. I'm just
Yeah. So next to last question here. So what makes Jacoby Pine's adventure so relatable to your readers?
he does something I think that a lot of us dream about doing, which is well, I hope that he comes off as a sympathetic soul when he sort of loses his job in New York due to a silly mistake. He texts a group of his colleagues, and he just thought he was texting a friend who's also a colleague, and he got fired for it. Right? And shamed, beyond like sort of redemption. So like he's displaced, he's spinning, he's depressed, right? He's suffering from depression. And when he gets to Italy, it soothes him. It assuages all his anxiety and his hopelessness. And he decides to do something that like a lot of people talk about doing. If I sold a book for a person who came to me and said, oh, I wish I had moved to Italy like you did, I'd be a bestseller. I mean, it's like one of those people like wish they were able to do it. And I don't credit that to lack of courage. I mean, it takes a wild amount of resources and a little bit of chutzpah and just good timing, etc. There's a lot of things that go into it. Right? But I think Jacoby does that what people would like to do, and and also really digs what he's doing. The fact that he's able to immerse in Italy, and become what he calls and what I call myself an American Italian. Right? So I'm Italian American, and I think this is probably pertain to you as well, Emma. Is that yes, we're Italian Americans, we're also Americans who love Italy. Like we sort of adopted that country, the peninsula, right? As a place that we love and has a place that is part of us, right? And I think that people admire the way Jacoby accomplishes that, and pretty damn fast and thorough.
You make an interesting point, American Italian. So in the Italian language, adjectives always follow the noun. Instead of in the English language, they come before the noun. So I'll leave with this last question here. What do you have to say to my generation of Italian Americans about what it means to be American Italian?
I think that what happened for a long time is that a lot of Italian immigrants wanted to distance themselves from where they come from. Right? They wanted to assimilate. My mother's parents, to a certain extent, then my father's parents. My grandfather didn't speak English; he had no choice, right? But like a lot of the immigrants, learned English and didn't want Italian spoken in their homes. They wanted their kids to be American. Right? They would maintain their pride, of course, and we have a huge history of that, of sustaining the pride in where we come from. But it's also sort of a push, sort of in many circles, to sort of distance from the Italian part. It was associated with things maybe that were negative, poverty and crime, whatever. Right? And they didn't hear the language growing up. They didn't fully immerse in the customs, and as a result, there was kind of a disconnect generationally, right? And I think that in each generation it goes on, it becomes more and more diluted. I think. And what I encourage people to do is not only to embrace their Italian American heritage here, which is so beautiful and important, but to really understand Italy, the country. It's a much different place. The cuisine's different. The languages you hear, the dialects will be different, right? The experience of that country is one that you can do, and it's where you come from, right? I mean, it is your roots, right? But it's distinct. Each region is so different, right? If you're from
Definitely.
Belize, right, and you're from Piemonte, you're different planets, right? And there's so much going on in each of those places, but they're still, within the Italian, realm. But I think that they should embrace the country of Italy, to go visit and not just go find their ancestors' village, right, and try and knock on doors, etc., which is fine to do, right? But like just to understand what makes the country where we derive from such a special place, and it is a special place. I mean, modern, civilization, right? The physical, you know, bounty of the peninsula. I mean, it's surrounded by sea that's long and narrow, right? With rich, seas and minerals and volcanoes and beautiful mountains and marble and these incredible trees and the sky, and everything is. I eat the dirt there. It's so mineral rich, right? And the things they make there, the wines and the olive oils and the way they treat their animals and raise them, and the vegetables and everything there is just such. It's paradise. Okay? And if you happen to come from that, you sort of it's a nice thing to sort of use as a entry into a place that's I think the best place in the world.
Well, like I said, we could talk forever because,
I
again,
know what's going.
when you meet somebody who's just as passionate as you are, you just relive your own passionate experiences, etc., about what it means to go back. It relives through us. Memories come to life. Food comes to life, etc. I just want to tell you, I appreciate you sharing your time with me, especially too. You are an outstanding writer, and I hope to get everybody here in Northeast Ohio familiar with your writing, and that we can, get out there and just get a little bit past the primo corso and get a little deeper and be a little bit more open to experiences like you've shown with the anchovy oil. Get into the sardine can, and let's try to make something that we're not used to.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you having me on the show, and for
Yeah.
your helping me find audience. That's the hardest part about being a writer is getting writing the books is easy as compared to getting people to read them. So
Oh, definitely. Definitely. You can put a book out there, but is somebody going to open it up? You got to get people to open it up. Definitely agree with that.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a anchovy oil shot and get off the air.
For all of that. Yeah.
Do a shot.
So I have now created a tradition of ending my podcast, and I say ciao for now, but prossimo tiempo, for next time, because we will definitely have you on again, because you have a very interesting book coming out here in the coming year. So prossimo tiempo, ciao for now. Thank you, Andrew Cotto.